loves me more because I can buy a char. That's a good thing. So in a very selfish way, biochar is an awesome thing. And as Lisa said before, it's not complex. It's not hard to do. Anybody can do it, and we're trying to encourage as many people to use it as possible. If you look at this beautiful lake here, and you look at the number of homes around the lake, so somehow we have things leaching into the lake, whether we want it or not.
Sure, right.
But the more people you can get to use biochar, that acts like a filter around this lake, the healthier the lake is going to be for years to come. The thing about biochar too is biochar lasts for years, thousands of years. If you're somebody who likes to add fertilizers to what you're growing, you start using biochar, you are going to see you don't need to use as much fertilizers anymore because you apply it and it stays in the biochar. Hopefully there's organic fertilizer that we're talking about now, right? Not that Monsanto stuff. Tim has been using it in his own garden for a long time. Every tree I plant has biochar added to the root system, just because it works. And it's so easy to do. I have Tim. Tim is a soil scientist, and he calls himself retired. But I think it's only in name because this guy is busier than anybody else.
I had the fortunate opportunity to have a career where I worked outside in nature, and I worked among 24 tribal organizations and federal government organizations in 10 states, and I did that just following what came up to try to learn about soil. When biochar came along, I only found out about it 6 years ago, and I thought, wow, how come we're not doing this? This is incredible. We have some challenges that came along with the way we've been living in the world, and one of them is soil degradation. This is it's a worldwide map that's only recently been done for soils, but there's data behind every polygon out there, and scientists are using this more and more to study climate change and so forth. One of the other things I did, I mapped soils, and I was involved in water rights, and particularly for Native Americans, and so there was a lot of controversy around the work that I did because a lot of what we did went into court. This is the first worldwide map that was compiled in the late 1500s by a Belgian cartographer. You can see a lot of artwork went into this thing too, but it was the first time that anything was rendered on one page. And you can see how he got Europe right, maybe parts of Africa right, but he didn't get North and South America nor Antarctica.
Michigan, I don't see any Michigan.
Soils called terra preta or dark earths have been showing up, and it's estimated now that there were as many as 10 million people down there. They were able to make soil, and this is a before and after. The profile on the left, each one is about a meter deep. The profile on the left is tropical rainforest as it happens the soil naturally under there, and the one on the right is enhanced with char and everything that goes with it. Now they call it a kitchen midden, or it's everything that was waste went back into the soil. It wasn't until a soil scientist came through in the 1960s and wrote a PhD on it, sampled it and took it back to the lab, they realized the char was a major component and why it's black and why it's so rich. Meanwhile, back in Michigan, the Kalkaska soil, you can see that the coloration might be very similar, and typically what happened was we took the forest off and then plowed that upper, so now it's in places where we're farming it and so forth, we just have a plow layer above this yellow sand. I spent 40 years describing these things meticulously, digging a hole, recording everything that was there, sampling. 2009, a guy from Cornell University, Professor Johannes Lehmann, put together a team of 92 professors around the world, and they put this 1,000-page book together on everything. each team was assigned a chapter. This is information from that book, and this is chart showing how stable biochar is. You're losing some to combustion, but it then levels out and becomes a stable component of the soil, whereas anything organic like grass or twigs or logs or compost continuously decomposes.
There is a group of people who ask the question, why not just compost? Why do you have to burn things? That's the difference.
I think it acts more like a filter versus organic material continues to break down. It's not really filtering anything, right? Versus biochar is actually able to provide that filter.
This is a microscopic picture of the feeder roots actually going in and using the little char particles as kind of like antennas, but they absorb nutrients that way. Electron scanning microscope, you can see it's very porous, it's got a high surface area, and it's a complex substance. So this is a low-tech kiln that we commonly use here with our people, our network. You can see there's not a lot of smoke when it's done right, and on the right is after several hours of piling up fresh material on top. It's called a flame cap kiln, and it's kind of the combustion and the heat process takes place on top, and then as the char builds up underneath, it completes the charring process, but there's a lack of oxygen enough that it doesn't burn to ash.
Yeah, I did kind of an interesting experiment because the sellers that we bought this house from left us a whole shed full of cut wood. Oh. And they've got everything from bigger pieces and then a bunch that are in this 2 to 4 inch thickness and then a bunch of branches. Well, does it take longer? Can I make more if I use thicker logs? Things like that. So I did one batch of just all the skinny little branches that were all the same size. And then I did the thicker logs. Nothing really over 4 or 5 inches, I think, but I kept them all consistent. And what was interesting is it made the identical size biochar. The point is that you have to have the same size burning wise.
So you see in the picture here, as the wood burns, your coal goes to the bottom. All right, and this area here doesn't have much oxygen at all. So you don't have a lot of burning happening here. So those big logs that burn first, that coal is going to go down. And you have a bed of coal here. If you're careful, you should be able to get a little more burn on top and still, maintain this. Right. Okay. Of course, if you let it go too long, even this will eventually go to ash. And I'm glad you brought this up because even the type of wood you're burning, the volume of char you're going to get based on if you burn hardwood, for example, or softwood is going to vary.
And then I would assume that it's best to add it in fall, especially for us, because especially if you're mixing with compost or what have you, then it gives all the winter months to kind of do its thing, and then it's just ready for planting in the spring.
Sure.
We ended up doing that by accident because we had already got our garden in before we started making the char. And so we put it in the fall after we pulled everything. So last year was the first year growing anything on it. I could not believe it. It was, I was impressed.
So it works in a pit as well, and I'll show you the tomatoes I got out of that. So, there's the summary: chemical, physical, and biological benefits, like we were all talking already. Depending on the temperature, we've already been through this. It turns out the best is right about a campfire, about 1,000 degrees, which is perfect. If you go hotter, you're combining them even tighter, and this is the activated charcoal. This is the stuff that's probably partially charred, but not enough. And then looking at our DNA, wow, there are those rings again. So we have it in our DNA to work with fire and to eat stuff that comes out of the ground. And that's from that pit. This was my first year of tomato growth. I've never seen leaves that big.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
great.
huge. Wow.